The Queen of Shadows had never felt warmth until she touched him.
Cassian Voss groaned as he woke up, his head pounding like a war drum. The last thing he remembered was sitting at a grand negotiation table, discussing peace terms with the Nixari Empire. Now he was sitting on a cold stone floor, his hands bound in shimmering energy cuffs. He lifted his head, blinking at his surroundings. The massive throne room was dimly lit, its towering walls carved with swirling patterns of darkness. Shadows flickered unnaturally, almost alive, curling around the pillars like silent spectators. At the center of the chamber, seated on a raised obsidian throne, was Queen Zalvera. She was tall and regal, her dark armor etched with glowing violet lines, a long flowing cape draped over her shoulders, and her silver hair framed a face as sharp as a blade. Her eyes, cold, golden, and piercing, studied him with an unreadable expression. Cassian sighed. This was not how diplomacy was supposed to go. "Ah, good. You wake," Zalvera said, her voice smooth, but edged with authority. "I was beginning to think you were fragile." Cassian squinted. "Yeah, I get that a lot." He shifted uncomfortably. "So, not to be rude, but why am I in space jail?" The Nixari nobles lining the room whispered among themselves. Some looked amused, others looked like they wanted to rip him apart. Zalvera leaned forward slightly. "You do not know your crime. Unless being charming is illegal here, I'm drawing a blank." A Nixari general stepped forward, his deep blue skin contrasting with his black ceremonial robes. "You offered your hand to our queen." His voice was heavy with disgust. In Nixari tradition, that is the ultimate sign of a marriage proposal. Cassian's stomach dropped. Oh no. He remembered the moment vividly now, reaching across the table, trying to seal the deal with a handshake. A friendly human gesture, a simple, harmless act. Except, it wasn't harmless. Not here. Cassian's eyes darted to Zalvera, who remained eerily calm. "Okay," he said carefully, "that was not my intention." "Intentions are irrelevant," Zalvera replied. "I accepted." Cassian blinked. "Wait. Hold on. You accepted?" A slow nod. "Accepted as in? You are now my consort." Cassian's brain short-circuited. "That's... wow. Okay, love that for us. But, maybe there's a loophole, a cultural refund policy." One of the nobles laughed. Another one whispered, "Pathetic." Zalvera's gaze sharpened. "Are you refusing?" Cassian opened his mouth. Then he saw something in her expression, a flicker of something dangerous. The entire room was waiting. The nobles, the generals, the shadowy warriors standing guard. They weren't just observing, they were judging. Cassian had seen enough alien diplomacy to know one thing. If he refused in the wrong way, this wouldn't just be a failed negotiation. It would be a declaration of insult. And insults, in Nixari culture, were settled in blood. He exhaled slowly. "I'm just saying, maybe we should talk this through." Zalvera studied him for a long moment. Then, to his horror, she smirked. "You amuse me, human." She turned to her court. "Prepare the rite of acceptance. The consort must be tested." Cassian's stomach clenched. "That sounds ominous." The Nixari general grinned. "It should. If you fail, you die." Cassian groaned. "Worst first date ever." Cassian Voss stood in the center of a massive circular arena, staring at the crowd of Nixari warriors surrounding him. This was bad. The arena floor was made of smooth black stone, carved with glowing violet battle sigils. The walls stretched high above, with shadowy figures watching from balconies. The Nixari people had gathered in full force, nobles in elegant armor, warriors sharpening curved weapons, and cloaked assassins perched on ledges like hunting birds. At the royal balcony, Queen Zalvera sat with her usual calm golden eyes fixed on him. She looked completely at ease, as if this was just another routine event. Cassian, on the other hand, felt like he had been thrown into an alien gladiator pit. A Nixari official, an elder with silver tattoos across his dark blue skin, stepped forward and raised his staff. "The rite of acceptance shall now begin." His deep voice echoed across the arena. The queen's chosen consort must prove his worth. Cassian winced. "Yeah, so, quick question. How exactly do I prove my worth? The elder ignored him. 3 trials will test his strength, cunning, and spirit. If he succeeds, he will be recognized as Queen Xalvera's rightful mate. If he fails, a warrior behind him cracked his knuckles. Another unsheathed a blade that hummed with energy. Cashin sighed. If he fails, he dies. Got it. The Xalvera finally spoke, her voice smooth but firm. You may withdraw now, if you wish. Cashin glanced at her. Was she giving him an out? He considered his options. He could try to argue his way out of this, but that probably wouldn't work. He could run, but he doubted he'd get far. Besides, a small part of him was curious. Xalvera was fascinating, strong, beautiful, and completely unreadable. The Nixari culture was brutal, but there was a strange kind of honor in it, and deep down, Cashin loved a challenge. He straightened his shoulders. I'll take the trials. The crowd murmured in approval. Some looked amused. Others looked disappointed, probably hoping for an easy execution. Xalvera's lips twitched, almost like she was pleased. The elder struck his staff against the ground, then let the first trial begin. Trial 1. Strength. A massive Nixari warrior stepped forward. He was at least 7 feet tall, his body covered in thick armor and dark tattoos. His 4-fingered hands gripped a long, spear-like weapon that crackled with blue energy. Cashin sighed. Of course, it's a fight. The warrior lunged without warning. Cashin dove aside just as the spear slammed into the ground, sending up a shockwave. The audience cheered. Cashin scrambled to his feet, thinking fast. He couldn't outmatch Nixari warriors in raw power, but humans had something else: speed, adaptability, and trickery. Instead of fighting directly, he dodged, rolled, and weaved, forcing the warrior to waste energy. The Nixari crowd muttered in confusion. This was not how honorable combat was done. Finally, when the warrior overextended his swing, Cashin grabbed a handful of arena dust and flung it into his face. The warrior stumbled. Cashin rushed in, snatched the spear from his hands, and slammed the blunt end into his opponent's gut. The warrior crashed to the ground. Silence. Then, cheers. Xalvera raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Trial 2. Cunning. A large stone table was brought forward. On it was an intricate puzzle made of interlocking rings and glyphs. The elder gestured. Solve it before the sand in this timer runs out. Cashin grinned. Now this was his kind of challenge. He studied the puzzle. The glyphs pulsed faintly, responding to touch. It reminded him of an ancient earth lock mechanism. While the Nixari crowd expected him to struggle, Cashin worked fast. He analyzed patterns, shifted rings, and, after a tense moment, found the hidden release latch. Click! The puzzle snapped open just as the last grain of sand fell. Gasps, whispers. The Xalvera watched him with genuine intrigue. Trial 3. Spirit. The elder turned to Cashin. You must drink the elixir of shadows. A Nixari servant handed him a small black vial. The liquid inside swirled with eerie darkness. Cashin hesitated. What does it do? The elder only smiled. Cashin looked at Xalvera. She tilted her head, waiting. He could refuse. He could walk away, but something inside him, some reckless, defiant part of him, refused to back down. With a deep breath, he drank. The moment the liquid touched his throat, cold fire spread through his veins. His vision blurred, his mind filled with shadowy whispers. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay upright. The world swayed. The shadows twisted, and then a sudden clarity. The whispers faded, the pain dulled, and Cashin stood tall. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Xalvera rose from her throne, her golden eyes locked onto his. You pass. Cashin exhaled. He had survived, but something told him this was only the beginning. Cashin Voss stood in stunned silence as the cheers of the Nixari warriors echoed through the arena. He had passed the trials. Which meant he turned his gaze to Queen Xalvera. She was watching him, her golden eyes unreadable, her silver hair catching the dim light. She stepped forward, her dark armor shifting like living shadows. The human has proven his worth, the elder declared, slamming his staff against the ground. By the laws of our people, he shall stand beside our queen. Cassian blinked. Wait, so that's it. I'm officially my consort, Exalvera confirmed smoothly. The word sent a murmur through the crowd. Some warriors looked satisfied, others looked furious. One particularly large general crossed his arms, his four-fingered hands tightening into fists. Cassian sighed. Yep, someone was definitely going to try and kill him in his sleep. Exalvera gestured toward the palace. Come. Cassian hesitated. Then, with no better option, he followed her up the stairs leading to the towering black fortress. The crowd watched in tense silence as the doors closed behind them. Inside the queen's domain, the palace halls were massive, lit by violet torches that flickered with strange energy. The walls were etched with shifting runes, and the air was cool, humming with unseen power. Cassian glanced at Exalvera. So, what exactly does consort mean in Nixari culture? She didn't stop walking. It means you are bound to me, my equal in standing, though not in command. Cassian raised an eyebrow. So I get all the royal perks, but none of the power. She finally looked at him, her gaze sharp. You have power, but whether you keep it depends on how well you survive. Cassian exhaled, comforting. They entered a vast chamber lined with high columns. Dark silk banners hung from the ceiling, and a single enormous throne stood at the center. The Exalvera stopped at the base of the throne and turned to face him. You are an outsider, she said. Many will oppose your presence. They will challenge you. Of course they will, Cassian muttered. It's been at least 5 minutes since someone tried to kill me. Her lips twitched in the slightest hint of amusement. Then she stepped closer, looking him over as if assessing him. You are unusual, she admitted. Cassian smirked. Flattery will get you everywhere. Her golden eyes narrowed. It was not flattery. Cassian chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. He should have been terrified. He was on an alien world, surrounded by warriors who wanted him dead, married to a queen he barely understood. And yet, a strange part of him liked it. Before he could respond, a deep voice interrupted. This is a mistake. Cassian turned. The massive general from before stood in the doorway, his armored arms crossed. His dark blue skin glowed faintly under the torchlight, and the look in his eyes was pure hatred. Exalvera regarded him calmly. Commander Varric. The throne cannot be shared with an outsider, Varric said, his tone controlled but dangerous. This human weakens you. Cassian sighed. Here we go. I just passed your little death trials, he pointed out. So either your traditions mean nothing, or you're just mad. I did better than expected. Varric's jaw tightened. You insult our ways. You insult them by questioning the queen's choice. Cassian shot back. A tense silence filled the room. A flicker of something, approval, passed through Exalvera's gaze. Varric's fists clenched. A challenge, then. Cassian groaned. Why is it always a challenge? You stand by her side. Varric growled. Prove you deserve it. Cassian looked at Exalvera. Do I have to? She met his gaze evenly. You must show them you will not break. Cassian exhaled. Then he grinned. Well, he said, rolling his shoulders, let's get this over with. Cassian Voss stood in the center of the palace's training hall, rubbing his temples. Across from him, Commander Varric loomed like an angry storm, his arms crossed over his broad chest. Around them, Nixari warriors gathered to watch, their glowing eyes eager for blood. Cassian sighed. Why was he always fighting for his life? Exalvera sat on a raised platform, her golden eyes calm. She had not stopped the challenge. Cassian wasn't sure if she expected him to win, or if this was just another Nixari way of testing him. Probably both. Varric stepped forward, dropping his heavy cloak to reveal a body covered in war tattoos and battle scars. He cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing through the chamber. The rules are simple, the elder announced. Victory is claimed through surrender, or unconsciousness. Cassian exhaled. Great. A Nixari servant approached, offering him a weapon. A curved blade, humming with energy. Cassian shook his head. No thanks. Varric sneered. Too afraid to wield a warrior's blade? Cashin smirked. Nah, I just like keeping my options open. The elder raised his hand. Begin. Varric moved fast. Cashin barely dodged as the commander lunged, swinging a powerful strike. The air hissed as Varric's gauntlet nearly took his head off. Cashin dropped low, rolling out of reach before hopping back to his feet. The warriors watching let out murmurs. Varric's golden eyes narrowed. You run like a coward. I fight smart, Cashin shot back. Varric rushed him again, throwing a brutal punch. Cashin sidestepped, letting the larger man's momentum carry him forward. Then he twisted and landed a sharp kick to the back of Varric's knee. The commander stumbled. Cashin grinned. Progress. Varric recovered instantly. He spun and slammed his forearm into Cashin's chest, sending him skidding across the floor. Cashin wheezed. Okay. Ow. Varric didn't hesitate. He was on him again in seconds, fists flying in precise, bone-breaking strikes. Cashin ducked, blocked, and dodged. But the commander was relentless. Cashin needed an opening. Instead of backing away, he stepped forward, catching Varric off guard. He grabbed the commander's arm, twisted, and used the warrior's own momentum to throw him over his shoulder. Varric slammed into the ground. The watching warriors gasped. The human was still standing. Varric growled, pushing himself up, but Cashin didn't let him. He dropped low, sweeping his leg under Varric's feet. The commander fell again. Cashin jumped back, breathing hard. You know, for all that talk, you spend a lot of time on the ground. Varric's eyes burned with fury. He roared and rushed forward. Cashin grinned. At the last second, he sidestepped, and Varric's charge sent him crashing into a stone pillar. The impact shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. Varric groaned, sliding to the floor. His limbs twitched, but he did not get up. Silence. Then the elder raised his hand. The challenge is over. Cashin exhaled. He had won. The warriors exchanged looks, some surprised, others grudgingly impressed. Cashin turned to Exalvera. She stared at him, her golden eyes gleaming. Then, a smirk. Interesting. Cashin chuckled, rubbing his sore shoulder. Glad you're entertained. The elder stepped forward. The consort has proven his strength. Exalvera rose to her feet, and now he will prove himself at my side. Cashin blinked. Oh no. What now? Cashin Voss wasn't sure which hurt more, his bruised ribs from the fight with Commander Varric, or the sudden silence that followed his victory. The Nixari warriors, who had been eager for his failure, now stared at him with something new, uneasy respect. Some whispered to each other, others glared, clearly wishing he had lost. And then there was Queen Exalvera. She stood tall on the raised platform, watching him like he was a puzzle she hadn't yet solved. Her silver hair shimmered in the dim torchlight, and her golden eyes held a glint of amusement. Your body is weak, she said at last, but your mind is sharp. Cashin placed a hand over his aching ribs. Well, that's one way to say good job. Some warriors looked scandalized by his casual tone, but Exalvera smirked. She turned to the gathered warriors. My consort has proven himself in combat, but strength alone does not rule a kingdom. Cashin's stomach sank. Here it comes. Exalvera raised a hand, and a Nixari diplomat stepped forward. He was tall and draped in layered robes, his face half hidden by a ceremonial mask. A deep purple insignia shimmered on his chest. This is Envoy Zorith, Exalvera announced. He represents the Vasheri Empire. Cashin frowned. The Vasheri. That's the rival empire, right? The ones who almost started a war with you. Zorith inclined his head. A war that we still wish to avoid, he said smoothly. Which is why I am here, to negotiate. Cashin eyed him warily. Something about this guy felt off. Exalvera nodded toward Cashin. You will speak with him in my name. Cashin blinked. Wait. What? Zorith's eyes narrowed. You wish for this, outsider to negotiate matters of state. Cashin raised a hand. Yeah, I'd like to second that question. Exalvera merely lifted a brow. You claim to be clever. Prove it. Cashin opened his mouth, then closed it. Oh, she was testing him again. He sighed, rubbing his temple. All right, fine. He turned to Zorath. Let's talk. The first negotiation. Cassian and Zorath sat across from each other at a long table, surrounded by Nixari guards. The tension in the room was thick. Zorath folded his hands. I will be direct. The Vashari seek a new trade agreement. Your queen has refused our past offers. Cassian leaned back. I'm guessing your offers weren't exactly fair. Zorath's lips twitched. Fairness is subjective. Cassian sighed. Yeah, this guy was definitely a politician. All right, he said. What do you actually want? Zorath hesitated. Then slowly, he said, access to the Shadow Gates. The room stiffened. Cassian had no idea what the Shadow Gates were, but judging by the dead silence from the Nixari warriors, it was bad. Cassian glanced at Salvera. She gave him a single look, a warning. Do not agree. Cassian turned back to Zorath, thinking fast. If he rejected the offer outright, it could escalate tensions, but if he entertained it too much, he might lose the Nixari's trust. So instead, he did what he did best. He bluffed. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. The Shadow Gates are worth far more than what you're offering. Zorath's eyes flickered with interest. Oh. Cassian nodded. You want them? You better bring something big to the table. The diplomat studied him, calculating. Then, at last, he said, I will return with a better offer. He stood, bowing slightly. A pleasure, Consort Foss. As he left, Cassian let out a slow breath. The Xalvera stood, stepping closer. You stalled him. Cassian smirked. Yeah, that buys us time, right? She studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she said, Well done. Cassian chuckled. Careful, I might start thinking you actually like me. Xalvera didn't answer, but as she turned away, her smirk remained. Cassian Voss stood on the palace balcony, staring at the alien sky. Twin moons cast a soft glow over the Nixari capital, their silver light reflecting off the towering black spires. He sighed. How did he end up here? 1 minute, he was a lone human diplomat caught in a messy galactic conflict. The next, he was the consort of Queen Xalvera, dodging assassination attempts and negotiating peace deals. And now, the Vashari Empire wanted something called the Shadow Gates. Cassian had no idea what they were, but judging by the way the Nixari warriors had reacted, it was important. A quiet voice interrupted his thoughts. You handled the envoy well today. Cassian turned. Xalvera stood behind him, dressed in her elegant black robes, her silver hair flowing over her shoulders. Her golden eyes, sharp and calculating, studied him. Cassian smirked. Did I? I was just making things up as I went. Her lips twitched. A dangerous strategy. Hey, it worked. She stepped beside him, looking out over the city. A long silence stretched between them. Cassian glanced at her. So, are you gonna tell me what the Shadow Gates are? The Xalvera didn't answer right away. Then, in a low voice, she said, The gates are not merely a resource, they are a weapon. Cassian tensed. A weapon? She nodded. Long ago, our ancestors created the Shadow Gates to travel instantly across the galaxy, but they discovered a terrible cost. Cassian frowned. What kind of cost? She turned to face him fully. The gates do not simply open space, they consume it. Cassian's stomach dropped. Wait, are you saying they destroy things? Xalvera's gaze darkened. Entire planets. Cassian inhaled sharply. That changed everything. The Vashari Empire wasn't just asking for a trade route. They were asking for a superweapon. No wonder you don't want them getting their hands on it, Cassian muttered. Xalvera's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. And now you understand why they must never be used again. Cassian rubbed his face. This just got way more complicated. So what do we do? He asked, because I don't think Zorath is just going to walk away. The Xalvera was silent for a moment. Then she said, We must ensure the Vashari never get the chance to use the gates. Cassian raised an eyebrow. And how do we do that? She turned, her golden eyes burning with intensity. We destroy them. Cassian blinked. Hold on, you want to wipe out an ancient piece of technology? Yes. Cassian let out a low whistle. That's a bold move. The Zalvera tilted her head. Do you disagree? Cashin thought about it. If the gates were as dangerous as she said, then yeah, getting rid of them made sense. But it also meant they were about to make a lot of enemies. He sighed. I don't disagree, but if we do this, we need a plan, because the moment the Vashari find out, they'll come for blood. The Zalvera smirked. Then we must be faster. Cashin chuckled. You really don't do things halfway, huh? No. She stepped closer, looking him straight in the eye. And neither should you. Cashin met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. For the first time, he realized they weren't just allies. They were in this together. Cashin Voss ran a hand through his hair, staring at the holographic map glowing above the war table. The shadow gates were hidden deep in the ruined expanse, a sector of space filled with wreckage from wars long past. Their mission was simple on paper: get to the gates and destroy them before the Vashari could take control. In reality, it was suicide. Cashin sighed. All right, let's go over this again. Across from him, Hexalvera stood with her arms crossed, golden eyes sharp. Beside her, Commander Varric, still sore from their last fight, grumbled under his breath, but he stayed silent. Cashin pointed at the hologram. This is where the gates are. The Vashari fleet is already moving in, which means we're on a timer. Vizalvera nodded. We will need a distraction. Cashin smirked. Funny you should say that. He tapped a flashing marker on the map. I may have borrowed some old Earth tech from my last mission. Varric narrowed his eyes. Explain. Cashin grinned. Let's just say I know how to fake a catastrophic reactor meltdown. If we set this up near the sector's asteroid field, the Vashari will think the entire place is about to explode. As Alvaro raised an eyebrow. And they will retreat. Cashin shrugged. Or panic. Either way, we get the window we need. Varric crossed his arms. And if it fails? Cashin smirked. Then we improvise. The Nixari warriors exchanged wary glances. They still weren't sure what to make of him. But Axalvera. She smiled. Then let's begin. The heist begins. Hours later, Cashin stood on the bridge of the Stormfang, Axalvera's sleek black warship. The ruined expanse stretched before them, a graveyard of broken battleships and lost history. Varric's voice crackled over the comms. We have movement. Vashari scouts inbound. Cashin nodded. Time to act. He turned to Axalvera. Tell your team to activate the decoy. Axalvera relayed the command. Moments later, a deep, rumbling explosion echoed through space. Cashin's sabotage device sent shockwaves across the sector, making every sensor in the area flash red. The Vashari fleet halted. Their ships hesitated, scanning for danger. Cashin grinned. Gotcha. Axalvera wasted no time. Move in. The Stormfang and its escort ships darted forward, weaving through the debris. The distraction worked. The Vashari fleet stayed back, unwilling to risk whatever catastrophe their sensors detected. Cashin exhaled. Almost there. The shadow gates loomed ahead, a massive black structure, pulsing with eerie energy. Ancient symbols glowed along its surface, shifting like liquid. Cashin swallowed. Okay, that's way creepier than I expected. Alvera ignored him. Prepare the detonation charges. Her warriors rushed forward, setting explosives along the structure. Cashin helped, placing charges at key weak points. But as he finished, an alarm blared. Varric's voice roared over the comms. The Vashari saw through the trick. They're coming. Fast. Cashin cursed. Of course they are. Axalvera didn't hesitate. Set the charges to immediate detonation. Cashin's eyes widened. What? We're still here. Her golden gaze met his. No fear, only certainty. We must finish this, Cashin. Cashin groaned. You're gonna get me killed, aren't you? She smirked. Only if you fail. The Vashari ships were closing in. They had seconds left. Cashin gritted his teeth. Fine, let's blow this thing. And together, they activated the detonator.